We're now excited to welcome in Jeff Benedict, who has followed many Mormon athletes closely. Most recently, Jabari Parker worked with him on a column that, well, it's more of a first-person essay from Jabari that came out yesterday on SI.com talking about declaring for the NBA. Jeff, welcome to the program. What was it like working with Jabari on that first-person essay for Sports Illustrated?
Good to be back, guys. And, boy, if you're at the BYU bookstore, I hope they're selling the system there. That's all I want to know.
I bet they've got it here. A fantastic book.
It is
system.
in here, yes.
Yep.
It was great working on that essay with him because what was unique about it was that there's never been an instance in the past where a student-athlete has declared, either for football or for basketball, that he's coming out early by writing an essay. The typical format, and we've seen this so many times, is you do a press conference or the university issues a press release. And we thought it would be great to do it in written form, and it really took off. It's still like the number one story on the SI website, and it was all day yesterday. And it had a great presence on social media, but it really made an impression. I talked to some people in the NBA yesterday, and they were just really impressed that he wrote an essay, and it's a good one. It's a really thoughtful one.
Jeff Benedict, Sports Illustrated columnist and award-winning author, co-author of The System, the Glory and Scandal of Big-Time College Football, along with Armin Katayan. He is back on BYU Sports Nation, one of our great friends of the program. You've followed Jabari's entire Duke career, and now as he begins a new chapter into the NBA. We asked you last week if you could tell us whether or not he was going to stay at Duke or go to the NBA.
Any inkling,
and
being close
you just
to him.
said,
stay tuned.
Stay tuned. So we're assuming that you knew at that point because you were working on this article. When did you know that he was not going to stay at Duke?
I don't remember the exact date. It's just that we worked on this piece for a while because it was the kind of thing that had to be done. It had to be done in a real thoughtful, careful way, and you can tell when you read it that a lot of thought went into it, and he was pretty intimately involved in the process. Unlike some people might assume that he wasn't, but he was. And right up through yesterday, when we actually published, he was actually in the editing room with us, editing both the piece and the video. So he was involved in all of it, and I started working with him on it. Certainly, before I talked to you guys last time, but I don't remember how far ahead of that it was.
Jeff Benedict is on BYU Sports Nation, award-winning author, BYU Sports Illustrated writer, or BYU Sports Illustrated.
Might as well be.
BYU Sports Nation contributor. Jeff Benedict is on the program. Jeff, you've talked, in the fall we talked about Jabari Parker a little bit, and that you talked about him taking the mantle almost from Steve Young as one of the most visible, if not the most visible, Mormon athlete or former athlete. You talked about a card that you gave him of Steve Young. Now he declares for the NBA. He could become the first African-American Mormon drafted into the NBA. Does he have a sense of what this means?
Oh, certainly. He certainly does. And, Steve's been important in Jabari's life on a number of levels. In that instance with me giving him the football card, it was a card that I asked Steve to give to me, to give to Jabari, because, whether you seek it or not, and Steve certainly didn't seek it when he was in the position he was in, and I don't think Jabari seeks it now, but the fact is that he is in a limelight, and his connection to his faith, will be something that is brought up during his life and during his career, and so he appreciates it. He knows it's serious, and he knows what he does on and off the court carefully, and I think he looks at guys like Steve, certainly Steve, as an example and someone to watch.
Jeff Benedict, Sports Illustrated author and columnist, an award-winning author on BYU Sports Nation, friend of the program for sure. And Jeff, I know that you have relationships with a lot of big-time BYU athletes. Kyle Vanoy, you followed his story, obviously. Jabari Parker with the LDS ties there at Duke. What kind of relationship do you have with Steve Young, who has been the flag bearer for LDS athletes for quite a while now?
Well, I consider Steve a really close friend. I know him pretty well. I've written some stuff about Steve. In fact, when I did the very first Jabari Parker profile for the magazine, I did a piece on Steve and Danny Ainge for Sports Illustrated in that same issue, just talking about their time at BYU and their decision process for whether or not to serve a mission, because that's such a typical question that Jabari gets. But I just think Steve, I've been around Steve in different environments and seen the kind of impact that he has on people. And it's interesting, like now, because he's been out of the game for, 14 or 15 years, but when Steve walks into an NFL stadium, even now, to do an ESPN broadcast, it's pretty fascinating to see how people react to him, old-timers that, custodians and security guards that have been working in these stadiums as far back as when he played, and they not only remember him, they still consider him like their favorite player. And I'm not talking about in San Francisco. I mean in places like Washington or Atlanta, and it's because of the kind of person he was when he played, and I think that's a real hallmark to the kind of life Steve's lived.
Jeff Benedict is on BYU Sports Nation. I just saw a tweet from @SportsBros. They said, I would love to hear Benedict talk about his Spencer Hadley story. That was a very inspirational piece. You were at the prison, a couple days after, or I guess the day after your article, or close to it, came out. You went to the prison, then you had an article come out. But
yeah.
What's been the fallout after that story a couple months later from the Spencer Hadley situation?
Well, I mean, I'm not sure what the fallout was. I know Spencer's suspension was reduced, which I thought was, not that my opinion matters on this, but I thought that was a good thing.
I guess more reaction to your article that maybe you heard from people.
Well, the reaction to the article is that article actually broke some records at Sports Illustrated.
Really?
Those records still hold. For instance, if you check the Jabari Parker story right now, the essay that we put up yesterday, as of an hour ago, it had over 10,000 shares or likes on Facebook. The Spencer Hadley story was up closer to 50,000.
Wow!
Nothing had ever come close to approaching that number. Jabari's number today is actually a huge number. It's a huge number. It completely. There's nothing close to it on the site right now, and there probably hasn't been anything close to that on the site in weeks. But the Hadley, and who knows how far it'll go in the next 48 hours. It could get much higher. But Spencer's story was the most successful story disseminated through social media ever on SportsIllustrated.com.
That's
ever.
Amazing.
Why do you think that was, Jeff?
Well, I think there's a couple of factors. One is because we can track not only how much it's disseminated by Twitter and Facebook, but also we can also see how many people are reading it on a mobile device. So in that case, the Spencer Hadley story had an enormous amount of readership on a phone, meaning they were using an iPhone to read it. And you track some of that back. And I know one thing. We know that there was a big amount of traction that came from the Deseret News, which picked up the story and disseminated it through their social media outlets. And so you can assume from that a lot of BYU alumni, BYU fans, Mormons, did some of that, but they certainly didn't do all of it. I think the other part of it is that there was just a tremendous reaction to the theme of redemption, which is not a theme we cover on Sports Illustrated very often. It's not something you would typically associate with sports. But Spencer's story is all about redemption. It's not about the BYU-Utah rivalry. It's not about any of that. It's not even really a football story. It's a story about redemption, and I think that theme really hits people. And so there were probably a lot of people who read that story who weren't necessarily interested in BYU football or even football at all. And I think that's why it did so well.
Jeff Benedict, an author and Sports Illustrated columnist for obviously the magazine and SI.com. I should say a record-breaking author for SportsIllustrated.com. With us on BYU Sports Nation. Let's go back to Kyle Vanoy, who is approaching the NFL draft. He was projected to be a second-round pick, 40th overall to the Minnesota Vikings, according to ESPN's Mel Kiper yesterday. Have you had any recent conversations with Kyle, and what are his expectations as arguably the biggest day in his professional career approaches?
Well, I mean, I stay in touch with Kyle, and I've talked to him recently. Yes. I think, Kyle's one of those guys that I think whoever ends up picking him, whatever round it's in, whether it's late first round or early second round or maybe the middle of the first round. You never know how high he could go in the next little while here. But the point is whoever gets him, I think they're going to be pleasantly surprised that they got a lot more than a football player. I mean, you want a great linebacker for starters because that's really what this is about. You're drafting a football player. But so often you wonder about what else you're getting with these guys. It's the same in the NBA draft. Is what else are you getting when you draft one of these players? And I think in Kyle they're going to find someone who's, first of all, he's really smart. He has a degree. It's a degree of substance from a great university. He's a smart guy that people don't necessarily associate, big, tough defensive players with smarts, but Kyle's really smart, and that actually translates well to the modern game of football. It's when a franchise realizes they got a kid who really has a good head on his shoulders, and he's someone who's got some character, and so, in other words, some mental toughness. So I think whoever gets him, we put such a focus on who gets picked first or second or third, but there's a lot of rounds in the NFL draft, and there are lots of players that go really early who never pan out. And there's plenty of players who go in the low rounds who end up being really good NFL players. I don't think in the end it matters a whole lot exactly where Kyle goes. But he's going to be a player that I think is going to be around.
Well, Jeff, great stuff as always. We appreciate the insight on Jabari Parker, Steve Young, Spencer Hadley, and of course Kyle Vanoy. And we look forward to what's next for you. So thanks, Jeff. We appreciate the time.
All right, terrific, guys. Take care.
Jeff Benedict of Sports Illustrated, an award-winning author. Check out his book, The System, The Glory and Scandal of Big-Time College Football.
Love that book.